Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for this event, Mr. Vincent Formica.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Montreal. You're here. You're not on a tarmac. That's all you've got. Yeah. Welcome to Montreal. There we go. That's great. That's great. Hello. Welcome to the 3rd Congress on Evolutionary Biology. It's not just a meeting. It's a Congress, so that's pretty cool. My name is Vince Formica. I'm from Swarthmore College, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the 2023 recipient of the IDEA Award, Dr. Corey Welch. The IDEA Award stands for Inclusiveness, Diversity, Equity, and Access, and was founded in 2019 by the 3 American societies. The committee is made up of 1 member from each of the societies and then a rotating student member among the different societies. The IDEA Award is given to a person at any career stage who has strengthened the ecology and evolutionary biology community by promoting inclusiveness and diversity in our fields. The award can be presented to a group or an individual. The recipient will receive a very nice swanky plaque here and will get a $1,000 honorarium. And the recipients are encouraged to submit an accompanying article for their IDEA work to the relevant society journal. Nominations are due in January of each year, so please, when you see that advertisement come out, please do nominate people. And self-nominations are welcome as well. We look at a lot of these nominations, and one of the joys of serving on this committee is to see the really, truly amazing work that so many of you are doing to make our subfield more inclusive, welcoming, and just. It's really inspirational to see it. In 2023, we chose Dr. Corey Welch to receive this award. One of Dr. Welch's great strengths is that in all of his work, he does his legwork. He does the research to figure out what is the cutting edge activities for training in STEM and DEI work, and he uses them to inform his practices. And so using this research and his training in vertebrate ecology and evolution, he established and now directs an award-winning undergraduate training program, the STEM Scholars Program at Iowa State University. During his work for the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Hispanics and the Native Americans in Science, also called SACNAS, he served as the board of directors for 6 years, and Dr. Welch has been hugely influential in this society. In this society in SACNAS, Dr. Welch launched an ongoing mentoring program for the Society's annual meeting and has served as a facilitator for the Linton Padre SACNAS Leadership Institutes. Another really amazing thing that Dr. Welch does that has huge, wide-reaching, cascading effects is that he does these seminars and workshops and presentations where he travels a lot around to biology departments and EEB departments, and he works with them on how to improve their STEM education to make it more welcoming and inclusive. And so you can contact Dr. Welch. I won't volunteer him, but you can send him an email and see if he's still doing these presentations. It's definitely on my to-do list for Swarthmore. He's done over 40 of these presentations, and folks just wrote us to tell us how helpful they were in really shaping their intro courses all the way up to their advanced courses. So most recently, Dr. Welch has founded the Sharon Farr Welch Northern Cheyenne Tribal Scholarship Program for students in his own Northern Cheyenne community to pursue higher education. So please give a warm international welcome to Dr. Welch, and he can come up and tell us about his work.
Tracy deposit this check. Thank you so much. This is a true honor to speak to the International Society and the Tri-Societies of Evolution, and I just want to thank the IDEA Award Committee and the people that nominated me and wrote letters. It's truly kind of awe-inspiring to be talking to an evolutionary biology audience strictly around these sorts of issues. I'm going to put my glasses down so I can read along a bit. Before I kind of get started, I want to say a couple things about not a lot of indigenous scientists get to talk, and I'm talking to an international community, and I'm going to be very U.S.-centric in a lot of the things about DEI that I'm going to talk about, but also I'm going to do some definitional things about how to refer to indigenous people of North America. There's lots of different terms. Some people love other different ones. When in doubt, try to get to the specific tribal nation that the person is affiliated with. There are 574 federally recognized tribal nations within the United States and Alaska, and so they all have their own histories, governments, et cetera, and indigenous is always just a good general term to use globally and across the Americas. Just a couple things about tribal colleges. I taught at a tribal college between my master's and PhD, and then briefly in my postdoc. There's 32 tribal colleges in the U.S. Most are offering AA and AS degrees, but there are a few doing bachelor's in environmental science, business, American Indian studies, and there's one new PhD program. They lack R1 or R2 even level infrastructure to do research. That was at one point a career path that I wanted to pursue. But the pay was going to be a nightmare. I was going to make less than I would have made as a postdoc, and I was in my late 30s, and I was like, I cannot do that. I grew up poor. I didn't want to remain poor. Middle class is fantastic. I'm living well above my means in so many different ways. Other terms, DEI, you see DEIJ, there's other kinds of terms, diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm using minority definitions from the NSF, NIH, kind of our federal policy, so African American, Black, Latino, Hispanics, American Indian, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians. Those are definitional minority folks. Some folks don't like minority, they want to say minoritized because it's actually a system being put upon them, and soon they will be majority populations in this country, in the United States. Underrepresented minorities is another term, or URMs. You'll see in some of my slides, or I might slip into these different terms. People of color, minorities plus Asian Americans. I use a broad definition when I think about when working with students. If you're Asian American, you are underrepresented in ecology and field biology and evolution. It's just a fact. And so you're not in that Asian category, obviously. It's problematic in general, as is some of these others. First gen, just to be clear, people that both their parents did not complete a college bachelor's degree. I use the term super first gen just in my own data because this isn't in the literature, but I have a sizable proportion of my students where both parents finished grade school and middle school was their highest level of education. And so my concerns are the things that we have to get them to where they want to go professionally in science often involves a lot of communication with family in ways that maybe the other first gen or second generation students don't. A Pell Grant is another broad approach to try to measure low-income students. There are a lot of low-income students that don't qualify for Pell, but this is part of the populations I work with. I am a Pell grantee. I'm a first-generation student in Northern China. And I'll say all of those categories are underrepresented at all levels in science. So they arrive on campus with the same interest or higher to pursue a STEM major, but get chased out for a variety of reasons about how we train and work with students and teach. Some of this is good research support, some of it's just Corey's working hypothesis. So how did I make it? How did this trailer park kid, there's a picture of the trailer I grew up in for the most part, used to be a basketball court on there. Play back in the day. How did I get this? And a lot of this has to Gould. Stephen Jay Gould was a big influence on me, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But there's a historical contingency, and that's why I like about Gould talking about the history of life. You play back the tape, it's not going to be the same if you play it, given the contingency of things that happened in the history of the planet. So my work in higher education and equity is around these values, understanding my origin story and where I want to go, and doing that with the students I work with. So I had great family support. I had some real big advantages of being native. It's really common for field biology in the Western US. So my family experience, which I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. But I also had this random lucky ass event, which was the mailman delivered Discover magazine when I was 16 to our mailbox. And the creation science stuff was going on. And I read this Gould article, and I was like, that's really cool. And I found out he wrote for Natural History magazine. My mom, that was my birthday present that year, was a subscription to Natural History. And by my senior year, I was reading ever since Darwin. Not that I was understanding everything in that, but I was doing my best I could. The biology teaching, I did not teach evolution in my high school, so it was not the best on that front. I am a product of affirmative action programs and DEI type trainings. And so I've had good mentorship. Blame Scott Edwards for why I'm here. These different people have been in different roles. I had some advantages. I look white. Even when I had hair, I looked a little more indigenous, and I was skinny and beautiful. I could pass as a white dude. And so there were some things that I had to jump through hoops as an indigenous student. I had read all the alcoholism literature while I was studying ecology. That was hours wasted in the library, hiking up there to download and read these articles, because I got tired of having that conversation. At least I'll throw science at it. You know, the answer is indigenous alcoholism is poverty-based. I said, okay. I come from a trailer park. I'm a little ornery. Been throwing punches now and then in my life, and it's helped me with that grit and creativity of being poor and working through. It makes me a good scientist. I can handle failed experiments, bad field conditions. Those were things that were highly valuable to me that makes me a good scientist. And so I use that. I also want to point out I'm a survivor of this process, and I'm preparing students to go into what is largely a toxic landscape in some ways in the STEM field. There's this famous photograph from World War II, it's in stats journals, about warplanes that survived where the flak hit the planes, those little red dots. I'm one of those red dots. So 2009, evolution, American Indian, PhD. American Indians and Alaska Natives are the only minority group where we've not improved our PhD numbers in the last 30 years. We've greatly increased bachelor's degrees, largely through those tribal colleges and things, but PhDs remain a big sore spot where we just have not made any progress. So, I'll give you a quick talk outline. Some different talks. I spoke at the March for Science. That was the one time I've ever been heckled professionally while speaking. I hope this isn't the second time. I was going to come on stage and make a joke because I've got all this weird headgear. I feel like a televangelist. 6,000 years ago, God created evolution's a lie. These are things that I wanted to make jokes on, but I sort of did. All right. So, I'll talk about these different things. I'm going to dabble on some things related to natives and science. It's not an area that I'm an expert on, but I certainly know some of it, and I just want to expose some of you to these sorts of things. If you ever want citations, I will Dropbox all kinds of papers for you on different things I'm talking about today. So, my origin story is my roots as a biologist. My grandfather drove the red dirt roads of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation nearly every day of his life. And we'd be bouncing around in that pickup truck bored, but sometimes we'd be hunting, sometimes we'd go on to go pick choke cherries, and we'd just see what we see. And that's what we was like, why are we going this way? See what we see. And those 10,000 hours, if you want to call it, or thousands of hours that I spent in the pickup truck gave me such big advantages when I started taking ecology classes and biology classes at Lewis and Clark College. And it just really transformed. My professors noticed, this guy's a maniac, he's scanning like a fool. I still do that. Every one of my family does this. This is a common thing in Indian country, particularly in the western parts of the country. So they're a population that has excellent field biology we're just not tapping into. That's some of my ancestors there. My grandfather's a little kid sitting on the lap. It's my great-great-grandmother who was a midwife. My mom grew up on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in the past, and she moved to Billings, which was 100 miles. And I'll talk a little bit more about that distance traveled was transformative for me in a generational leap. So this paying attention to nature, I get to play around a buffalo jump. There's still bison bones. I was there last November. You can dig around in the soil, there's bison bones. I'm sure there's arrowheads, so they would drive the bison, the whole tribe would be involved. You can see on the little bit, not quite, some little faint shadows on the sandstone on the side that's eroded away. those used to be steps, so you could climb up the side, fire arrows into injured bison without getting hit. It's a beautiful place, and obviously there wouldn't be trees back then. They would have done fire management around these sorts of things. But the bison are still in the area. So seeing what I can see led me to doing some really cool biology, some ecology and evolution things. These are some of the animals that I got to learn about through science. So being native and low income, you grow up, and it is a black screen for a reason. Just stare at me. When you're growing up in Indigenous, you see the differences between white communities and Indigenous communities. Socioeconomics are stark. The opportunities are stark. And so you have to ask yourself, well, how did this happen? And you get into kind of the history, and you start thinking about history and contingency and Gould in, and start thinking like an evolutionary biologist. Like, how did we get to this current presence? You know, genocide, land theft, broken treaties, et cetera, et cetera. So, and some people have then taken that throughout the years to figure out, well, why are there differences among populations of humans or racial groups? So we have this bad history in evolutionary biology and science in general, and it's flared back up again with some GWAS, poorly done methodologies, IQ type stuff. We've got folks that are into effective tech bros spending billions of dollars on effective altruism. There's some gross shit happening around some of these ideas that Lewontin, Gould, and past generations of evolutionary biologists kind of fought to demonstrate are pretty garbage ideas. And I love this quote from Gould, which was kind of the argument at the time we were worrying about Einstein's brain in the late 70s. Near certainty, people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. I'm an example of that. Not that talented, but definitely an example. So people have burned calories on Twitter and other social media platforms and in publications showing that this is some garbage research. But you as a society need to think about that they're going to keep applying these sorts of analyses to these garbage analysis, to things that social scientists are like, come on, you got to do better than this. And you as population geneticists know this is mostly garbage. So you're going to have to train folks to deal with this reality. And the reality is, it's the postal code and zip code of where driving all this, from redlining to where tribes are located in this country and the infrastructure supporting them. I love Brandon's quote here. It's pretty simple. Misrepresenting human genetic data, diversity in modern study is an act of scientific misconduct. It's as much as a technical point as an ethical point. So it'd be one of my recommendations is that you guys build this into your society, that you're kind of addressing this. You maybe actually haven't looked at the whole program, so there might be a whole session I'm like stomping on, but I hope that there is. So this is one of the things that you as a society have to think about what your values are around how you want to address certain sorts of things. Understanding the problematic history of museums. I love natural history museums. I think specimen-based research is awesome. But you got to talk about what happened with humans and specimens, and this is always a sore point in indigenous communities. So, and then, we've got parachute science and things like that where we're still working in the global south, but not on equitable terms. So we need to make sure that this becomes part of the norm of behavior. One of the big areas where Native scholars have risen to the challenge in the last 15 years is a bunch of young badasses have started publishing data and providing guidance on how to do ethical genomic work with Indian communities on biodiversity data. These are some of the groups. Singh has a summer institute here that's started in the US. It's now in Canada, New Zealand, Australia. There's some of these other folks that probably, the native biodata came out of the Singh folks. I know some of them, they're all in their early 30s to mid 30s. They're crushing it and doing a really service work because tribes don't have the bandwidth to do IRBs. So if you want to work, there's things like that. They don't have if you want to go work with tribes, they don't have the infrastructure to help you or to protect themselves from outsiders. Indigenous data sovereignty just means they have control over their own data and information. In practice, you just need to, this could be true of the Global South, you need to negotiate and agree on the data management sharing prior to submitting grants and or collecting data. I'd like to say that I haven't been asked to participate in a grant 48 hours before a submission, to be a PI, and to use my native credibility to work with a community in Iowa. I wrote a long email saying how inappropriate what they were doing was. They got the grant, reached out back to me 5 months later. Good times. Now, I'm not unique in that. Every Native has examples of this. And I'm always happy to advise people as best I can if they do want to work in Indian country, but don't ask me a week before. A true partnership involves before you develop the idea. So again, just want to show a bunch of these papers that are around there. So there's ethical genomics, things approaches. There's care practices, which is called a term in a publication from a year ago on biodiversity and ecology. There's just some really great young Native scientists doing this work. And one of them is speaking here on Tuesday is DeAndre Smiles from Leech Lake, Manitoba, Ojibwe. He's a professor at University of Victoria. I think he's a geographer primarily, but he is great Twitter follow before Twitter was garbage, but anyways. I'm really looking forward to his talk. I've never met the man. I heard he's virtual, so I still won't meet the man. A lot of traditional ecological knowledge examples. Just to give it a context of traditional ecological knowledge, is their reference of creation stories is plants, animals, rocks were there first. So generally there's not a lot of dominion language and how natives think about their relationship to nature. And they certainly don't think of pristine habitat as not having humans involved. And you know, my tribe was a farming community in southern Canada and northern Wisconsin. But we got pushed onto the prairie, so we lost all of that plant knowledge of Midwest prairie. That was true across indigenous communities throughout. So it's pretty amazing how much was lost through language death and extinction, but also through these breaking up of localized relationships. There are still some cool examples. This came out a few months ago. Blackfeet oral traditions in the people of America align with their creation stories, the genetics and the paleogenomics all align quite nicely. I grew up hearing Coyote and Badger were brothers. There's nice research showing that they hang out together, and they're more successful when they hunt together. There's a whole literature on this. I am not an expert in this, but trust me, you can Google this. There's plenty of research examples that you could be pulling into your intro bio or other examples of ecology classes or evolution classes. All right, so I'm gonna spend the rest of the big chunk of the time on the STEM Scholars Program. And so we've been doing DEI-related work at least 40 plus years. Billions have been spent, there's been some tiny progress, but for the most part, who's running things in science at universities and in our societies are largely white male, heteronormative, and ableist. And another thing to point out is the pipeline's a terrible metaphor. It's faulting the students, you're kind of cramming them into a rigid structure, you're fixing the students, it's a deficit model framing of these kind of programs. And I bring strengths, my students bring strengths. I'm that creative problem solver, I got that grit. Those are advantages. All those hours in my grandfather's pickup truck, I got strengths that could be exploited. They got exploited by Scott Edwards. Terrible. Just kidding. And then you think about the career pathways that y'all are going to head into. You know, a watershed's a better description of what you're going to do with your PhD. All right. So we have this data showing a lot of freshmen come in with that same or higher interest in STEM, and they get chased by year 2. There's this achievement gap that starts happening right as soon as they set foot on campus, on through to the faculty and beyond. So how we traditionally train students in the sciences doesn't address some of the needs that they have, on student retention and success. These are easy solutions in my opinion. We just have to kind of change some of the basic things of how we do this work. I won't get into too much of the detail on that other than presenting the program, but this is invite me for a department seminar thing, where I kind of get into a little bit more of the weeds about some hands-on things one can do. And the reality is, in the United States, minorities becoming majority. You know, is your department in 2027 ready for a majority of students of color in your intro bio classes? You can train up, get good at all this. This has to be part of your training to serve these populations. We need diverse folks. There's so much research on, you can beat the dead horse of diverse groups come up with brighter or more creative solutions, et cetera, et cetera. It's been studied in so many different fields. Yeah. Within STEM, biological sciences is doing relatively better when it comes to women, but it's not 50% of faculty in biological sciences. And evolutionary biology, as you know, you've done the surveys, you've seen the conversations that happened, you're still one of the low fields when it comes into biological sciences. I would presume low-income first-generation students are not that well represented here. How many are first generation? It's a good number. You guys should document that. I'm dead serious. How many of you are a Pell Grant? Please document this. Students need to see that some of you have already navigated this. So these are little things that just visually I think would be helpful. So I'm going to present the STEM Scholars as kind of a model program. It's ripped off, borrowed, adapted, a speciation event from the UC Berkeley program, the Biology Scholars Program. John Matsui is a national leader on this work. He's still one of my most important mentors. And so in 2016, I was able to launch this program. I worked for John for almost 4 years as a program coordinator for research programs. It's a really amazing program. 32 years, alumni all over, biology only, multiple publications, why it's successful. That's how the students view the program, with a word. I tried to rip that off, or borrow that, and keep saying. Iowa State insisted I do a STEM-wide program. So I'm a biologist, I had to learn chemistry, physics, and those sorts of things about, at least I'm okay in those fields. I wouldn't say I'm a badass, but I've gotten better at it. So the mission and vision is these high-minded things. All students can be scientists, effectively is what that's saying, from all backgrounds, and be leaders who solve global problems. We're building a diverse STEM workforce, bringing equitable solutions to societies, to solve global problems. And this is a model program that I'll hopefully make the case that you should be adapting to your institution in one form or another. So the approach is, of who it's for, it's open to all students. So yeah, I'm in Iowa. Things aren't great on DEI right now, necessarily for the work I'm doing. But my program is supposedly safe at this point, because it's always been open to all students. 20% of my the members are white. So I just center the needs of the students from an underrepresented lens. Recruitment, I largely do a couple emails now. I don't have to do a lot of recruitment now because we're in our 8th year, about to start in year 9. A lot of first years, sophomores, transfers. There's a fall and spring. I annually can take 40 new students. It's just a bandwidth issue. Up until 2 years ago, I was a one-man band. The last 2 years, I've had a 10 hours grad student. Woohoo! It's not a lot, but we're doing good stuff, and that's why I want to sell this in a big way, that this is a model of approval. So when we think about metrics of success, these are things I care about. What's the story behind that high school GPA, that SAT, that ACT score? What is the contingency that led to this in the first place? And in the application essay and in the interview to join the program, I'm trying to assess their passion for science. And if they read closely, I'm looking to see if they give help to others, which for minority communities, and mostly first generation low income, We tend to think we, not me. And that's a generally good thing with this philosophy and approach with the program. The other thing I love distance travel as an analogy. So at Berkeley, some kid from Oakland might be 2 miles as the crow flies. That could be 1,000,000 miles depending on the part of Oakland you're in. Oakland's getting too fancy now with that. But my mom moving from Lane Deer, Montana to Billings is 100 miles. And that's a generational leap in opportunities for her 3 kids. Persistence in the face of challenges and barriers. If that kid's sitting across from me and she applied, she already navigated a whole society that was set up for her to not be sitting in front of me. That's a scientist I want. So there's some skills there as creative problem solvers. And then as an individual student, I have to understand what are their individual barriers that they might have to navigate in relation to this Iowa State. And then, if they're engineering, we talk about some engineering specific challenges that you're going to run into, or evolutionary biology, et cetera, et cetera. The goal is to close the retention and graduation gap for underrepresented students. I want that 4 to 6 year graduation rate to be high, and I want that GPA to be over 3.0 so that they can go on to medical school, graduate school, et cetera, without having a gap necessarily. Some of our students need gaps years, retake classes, so chase the dream. Career exploration is a big thing, particularly people of color. Our networks are a lot smaller, and a lot of times our time at certain professional levels is driven by the lack of our networks not being as big. So we really intentionally get students to try to get into career exploration paid, so that they can figure out, I hate ecology, or I love, endocrinology. That's a huge win for them to figure that out before they get into their sophomore, junior, senior year, or after they graduate. The goal when I got to Iowa State was 300 to 500 members. Clearly, I'm not going to reach that anytime soon, but that would involve basically doubling and tripling the program size. The goal is to create leaders who don't need this program, because they're going to leave Iowa State. They don't have a program necessarily. Also, I want them to have opportunities to build their own infrastructure. So if they go off and do a cool internship, they help teach the workshop on how to apply to that internship. So we pad their resume and CV, but they get some activities. They don't have to necessarily be in the front of the room. We talk about leading from behind and those kind of things for students that don't want to be the song and dance person. So, okay. It's a 4-year plus learning community. Learning communities are a big thing at Iowa State. They tend to be 1 semester to a year. Membership is for life in this program. So students tell me when they don't want to be a part of the program. Our alumni play a role if they want to play a role, and I encourage it early and often. So again, there's that story behind incoming numbers. We're developing talent with a lens of strength-based. I could literally fill my Pro 40 slots with Black women whose parents are middle class or wealthy and have college or master's degrees or something. That would be a traditional SKIM program. We've been doing versions of that for 40 years. And yeah, we're making some progress. These programs are valuable and we need them. They're necessary but not sufficient. Okay, talked about the application interview. The big work we do is one-on-one coaching. So individualized development plans. I work with where the student is at. We work on what problems they have. They have access to me as many times as they want to meet. Some students I rarely see. I don't chase them. So there's about 10% that go through interviews, orientation, get all locked in, never see them again. So they're not in the database. I mean, they're in the database, but they're not in the data you're going to see tonight. So if you don't want to be part of this program's not serving you, figure that out, move on. And that's a really important message to keep nailing to the students. So these individualized development, we might talk about money, family, what's going on. A lot of my students have parents working in meatpacking plants. That's a risky job with no benefits and often immigrant populations. And so this is kind of where we have to work on making sure they're financially secure or stable. Some of them, you roll them off, show them how to apply to an REU, off they go, and they're just crushing it the whole time. They barely need the program, or you could argue they didn't need the program. So I reach all students at all levels of where they're at. So we do the strategic planning. I do peer tutoring, so I pay a couple juniors and seniors to do intro biochemistry, physics, math, the intro computer science program now, or classes. I teach a class every seminar. It's a 1-credit easy class. We talk about how an R1 university functions, break down a scientific article, how to write a personal statement and look for REUs, little things like that. It's just hands-on skills so that they can figure things out when they're on campus. We have a study room, and then we have these evening workshops. And again, program alumni can be a resource for the program. These are some of the workshops that we've run over the years. A lot of those all those in the box are student-run now. So they're just on the calendar. So I've got a bunch of students doing REUs this summer. A subset of them are teaching that workshop in the fall. So we've got slides, we kind of work, but they're telling their own story. They don't need to hear Corey's version of what grad school was like back in the day. Back when there was 3, Archaea didn't even exist back then. So, yeah. We've been pretty successful. We got some national awards. We had 2 GRFPs this year, which was great. We've had 23 publications, 24 SHPEP, which is this preeminent pre-health training program for health and dental students. We have a lot of McNair scholars, and we do all these sorts of things around making sure that they have access to the career path that they want. This is what 2024 looks like. For internships, those are a lot of computer science students now. That's been my big number. I've lost a lot of my biology students in the last few years. Some of you guys that teach, some of y'all that teach intro bio, I'm sure have noticed populations have gone down for bio majors. I write a lot of letters of rec. I have a form, I have a process, so I can keep track of it. And I make the students yell at me, "It's due tomorrow, Corey. It's due in a week." And they have to do that. So this is the process that they get to get comfortable with rejection and failure through this process. And they need to grow out beyond my abilities to be one of their mentors. I've got different mentors now than I did before. They need to do that same process by the time they graduate. These are some students who are going off to PhDs in the year, this coming fall. We have our first pharmacy and law students. So that's a little first, it was nice. A lot of biology majors there. Not a lot of ecology and evolution. We have a few off doing PhDs right now. I'll show you a little bit of data. So I'm going to talk about 217 students. I'll mostly talk about the alumni. I'm not going to talk about the current students. So I'll look at some of the demographics of Iowa State versus the program and see kind of, hey, are we kicking ass or not? So here's the pool. So Iowa State's a predominantly white institution, pretty skewed towards men. It's engineering, ag college, not surprising in a lot of ways. You can see it's low minority, about a reasonable first-gen low income is about typical for the country as far as representation, average ACT score, and you see the 4- and 6-year graduation rate and the average GPA graduation. It's a STEM scholars representation among those 115 alumni. So you see almost all of these programs around the country are heavily skewed toward women. 1, men don't apply. And then 2, there's some argument about men of color in particular get pulled out of the whole college pipeline through the criminal justice system. So aspects of that are driving that as well. But you can see I'm selecting students based on who applies and answers to those kind of questions. I'm not skimming badass ACT students that had prep courses throughout their life. We have some of those students. We have students that went to small high schools that don't have AP courses. So they didn't have the advantages of when they take organic chemistry. They get their butts kicked sometimes because they didn't have the same level of chemistry prep. So this is where our graduation rate is. For 4 years, 66%. It's significantly higher. 6-year is really high. GPA is solid. It's pretty high variance, 0.44 on standard deviation. We can break it down by minority students for Iowa State. For 4-year graduation rate, first-gen and low-income Pell students. This is IPED's data, so this is data you can pull off the internet, or from our institutional data. And then I just do the comparison with our students. 6-year graduation rate is crazy high. So we have, some students that do not make it, that I had high contact with, worked with them a lot, didn't make it. If they come back, they're still in the program. We've had students crash and burn, leave, come back a year later. Welcome, start working. Time to graduation is another bit of data that I'd like to look at. Most of the students are graduating in 4 years. You can see overall average, they might need an extra summer or semester. The one that graduated 7 years, that's a fail. They still graduated, but that 4 to 6 years is kind of the metric that people use across the country. And we could break it down by gender, minority status, parents' educational level, and that low-income status. There's not a lot there. There's a little bit of a trend. Underrepresented don't do quite as well generally, but I don't think that's a significant difference. The sample sizes are not great, but this is something maybe as we go further we'll think about analyzing in a more rigorous manner. But anyways, that's kind of where the program is after 8 years. And so I want to make the case in the next few slides is this is a great way to address the gap that we have for historically marginalized populations. HIPS is the new term everybody's using in higher ed right now. Impact practices, study abroad, research, internships, blah, blah, blah. We've been doing a version of that for a while, so it is what it is. This program is scalable. I'll tell you how much my program costs. It's my salary, my benefits, and $20K. And then the last 2 years where we've had that 10-hour-a-week grad student, $30K. Okay? It is cheap. Cost effective, a community college could fund this. You just need someone with y'all's training in ecology and evolution and willingness to kind of develop skills. I didn't have a lot of experience working with some populations that I work with now. I had to learn, I had to make mistakes, I had to do restorative work. Those kinds of things are part of this process. So y'all can do what I do if you're interested. It's pretty easy to get funding. I don't say it's not pretty easy to get funding. Wow, that's a terrible statement. Says the guy who's not gotten any funding externally. I've only applied a couple of times, but anyways, I don't like grant writing. That's part of the reason I didn't stay in academic science in the research game. As Scott Edwards can attest, he just published a paper that was part of my dissertation that I finished in 2008. It came out in 2022. Yeah! All right. Thank you, Scott and Peter Beerley, for dragging that dead monster on me. It was a good study. So, but this is Howard Hughes Medical Institute can fund these type of programs. NSF has some programs that could fund a program like this. There's some boutique programs that are really expensive that NIH can fund for some students that would be big money for the institution. Private industry funders, I've gotten a little bit of money here and there, a few thousand, but nothing consistently in a serious way. I don't get in front of millionaires very often. Any millionaires in the audience? All right, so I got my creepy televangelist headgear on, and so I just thought I'd ask. There's traditional training programs that get a lot of resources. So MARC is an NIH program, McNair's a national program, I'm not sure if through NSF. Their cost about $10,000 to $15,000 per student per year. So they have these small programs. They're great programs. They're year-round training for juniors and seniors towards a PhD. We got Mark and IMSD alum in here. Anybody Mark from IMSD? No? Okay. They tend to be biomedical skewed, but we've had evolutionary students in this program as well. Meyerhoff Scholars is kind of the Cadillac program. Zuckerberg's funding, Howard Hughes is spending millions and millions annually on this. There's about 8 schools doing it. It's $50,000 per student per year, and they do about 40 students. It's a crazy boot camp. I view it kind of like as a critical article just came out in higher education about some of their practices. It is highly successful. If you meet a Meyerhoff scholar, man, they're impressive. But they burn through some students in the process, and to me, the numbers aren't going to change doing 40 students at a time. I'm doing 40 students at a time. I'm not changing the numbers really, but I want to scale to 500, to 1,000 at an institution. Then we can start changing the numbers. Okay, my skill set and position, I have a unique skill set for the job I do. Most people have student support services, training, master's, maybe a PhD in education. But I've got field biology, I've got biology research, grant writing, all that sort of things. I fill a gap between the advisors and a connection to understanding where faculty are at regarding your teaching and research needs. And I can train a student so that when they set foot in your lab, it's not just like, oh shit, they're starting from zero. So this is a cool opportunity that I would argue should be at every institution in this country. I get approached by grad students and postdocs and some early career faculty about, I want to do what you do. Game on, let's start talking. All right, I will happily share stuff so that you can go do that. I'll connect you to other folks, some literature and things like that that'll help you along the way. So your PhD training is highly transferable. It just is. And so if this is something you care about, it's something you can do. All right, so this is the religious part of the talk. All right? I have one disciple in the crowd, Joe Belowski. Stand up and testify, Joe. Where's Joe? Don't mean to call him out. Joe and I had a nice talk, and he's done a version of this program with his bandwidth at Dalhousie. So he started that, I think, 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago during COVID. We just Zoomed. I'm happy to do this. I'm selling this. All right? If you want to go big, well, we can worry about money, but I won't worry about that. But this can be adaptable to the students in your institution, this approach. It's all about just kind of being kind and creating space for them to grow into the things that they want to grow into. Just to give you a sense, I've given a lot of these talks, like I mentioned before. I just want to point out a little bit of data. That's the only university that had more than 50% women in tenure track positions out of that list. Minority faculty typically at 0 or 1, and then there's been a couple that have. Ohio State had, I don't know if any Ohio State folks are, had 5. I'm not sure if they still have 5. But their gender numbers are horrible. Like they were in the lows, like they were in the 20s. And maybe that was 8 years ago, so this could be, I have not rechecked those numbers. But this model is out there where they were very intentional about hiring and retention of faculty, minority faculty. So there's ways departments can be creative around this. What I typically do, I present this program, I talk a little bit more about the research on grad student training, postdoc training, things like that. I do an Ask Me Anything session about my career path and some other personal stuff and other things that we can talk about, or we can talk shit about faculty. Yeah. I apologize for all the cussing. Blame the trailer park. I also am involved with this values-based leadership training through SOCNAS, and it's with some business professors, and I have a limited window where I can do some of my stuff. They're professionals in this field of working with STEM PhDs. It's this Linton Poudry. We have a postdoc version of this that's at the conference, so if you're a postdoc, you can apply. I think it's open right now. So if you want a free trip to SOCNAS this year, apply. I'm not involved in the selection process. But I do a little outreach thing that I've done with early career faculty around values-based activity. So there's a thing that I've done at a few institutions. Okay, so these are the kind of the concluding things here. I want to do some big and small ideas. There was an article that you'll see some of the mostly evolution people and some museum folks, some probably in this audience, where we kind of highlighted some of the work that faculty do in regards to promotion and impact promotion and tenure. There's some papers out there that you can use at your institution as you're thinking about your next faculty hiring, writing what that job description is going to look like. I mean, if you're a woman of color, you're going to write more letters of rec than your senior scientist, because the students of color are going to find you. So that has to be part of their work that they're going to end up probably doing. So that needs to be part of their 100% time. All right, change this retention promotion. That's a big challenge. Opportunity hires, they work to an extent, but you can always invite underrepresented postdocs, they kick the tires back, and you get an opportunity to hire. There's some nice research on different ways you can approach that. Recruit students and postdocs at SOCNAS. Y'all have been doing this for a couple years now. Look at that group of evolutionary biology leaders. That's really cool. The museum folks have started doing this. I think the booths are going to actually be in contact this year. So there's going to be a nice cohort of folks to drop in on. If you haven't experienced SOCNAS, just watch the YouTube videos. They have like little 1-minute videos of what the conference is like. I'll show you a clip at one point here as we're wrapping up here. But these are just things that are kind of big that you can start doing. More funding, obviously, throw more money at this. I know this is a trite answer, but if you want to bring R2 and community college faculty who are often teaching a large number of your students or future students, that get them to this conference and have things for them to do if they're not in the publishing game. Again, attack the human genomic stuff. You've got safe evolution stuff, which is great. So you're doing some of the good things that I would like to see. Here's something that you can do. Those are all evolutionary biologists that have participated in the one-on-one mentoring workshop. This has been going on for 9 years at SOCNAS. Bring in about 150 mentors to meet with 300 students. So you meet with a student for 40 minutes. I'll play a little video clip here, if I can. Just this 14 seconds. This is from last year. You meet with a student for 40 minutes, we kick the students out of place. Generally, we have a bigger room. We'll have a bigger room this year. That was like a COVID hot box. At least I was worried about it. I didn't get COVID, so. Whew. All right. But know that that's part of this approach. Some other small things. Field clothes is a big barrier for my low-income students. Hiking boots, field pants, things like that. The paid undergraduate positions, you gotta write these things in your grant. $200 for field gear is transformative for my students. It's really hard to get that into a grant budget, and it's hard to run around and go to a dean and get it. I've done it a bunch at Berkeley and at Iowa State, but it's always kind of a weird pool of money that we have to ask for this little bit of money, but it can be transformative for someone going out in blue jeans and tennis shoes for a summer of field work. It's just not viable. Build up your DEI receipts and your credibility, and this is just generally to the faculty. Look, we all got techniques we used to do. Sanger sequencing was all the rage when I started my PhD. You are creative and will drop a pour, you will pick up a new technique like that, a new statistical analysis. You are nimble, creative when it comes to your research, but not in your training of students and how you select those students. I want you to use that same around this other area. And when you do harm through this process, apologize, do the restorative work, and improve. Understand that person doesn't have to forgive you for your stomping on their toes, metaphorically. These are things I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A. I don't know how long, but I know we got microphones there and there. And so with that, I'll leave this slide back up, but I just want to thank the committee and thank you for listening to me tonight. And I'm happy to take as many questions as you want to throw at me. Thank you. Who's going to break the seal and be the first one to ask a question? I'm going to ignore that one, just to make it obvious. Hi.
I'll ask a hard question. I am a professor in Alabama, and as many of us are aware, there are initiatives across this country to make these types of initiatives challenging. DEI becoming sort of a dirty word, sort of to speak. What advice do you have for pushing against that threat and maintaining this type of initiative and programs as we move forward in our careers? Sorry, that's a really hard question. I don't have an answer.
I've seen a little bit of research on dealing with fascism, which is don't turtle before they attack. Don't take away things before they've actually asked for it. And I've seen a lot of leadership in this country in higher ed that are like, oh, we can't do that anymore. And it's impacted things at my institution. I'm not going to give any details, but it's like, they haven't even asked for that. We had a legal case about college admissions. And all of this inspired all this other stuff. That's people that really turtling. Sorry, trash turtles. Any turtle biologists in here that just offended? Oh my God, that's right. Nicole Valenzuela at Iowa State. I'm a monster. Oh my God. All right, I'm going to take hell for that one over beers in the future. Be creative as you are in your science about this. Look, I knew if I said before when I was at Berkeley, if they banned affirmative action tomorrow, the BSP program would survive. There's ways to kind of work around it. It sucks though, you gotta do this dance for what is effectively disingenuous attacks. And it's certainly not data driven. So that's the part I don't have a nice clean answer. I'm not at the pay level where anybody cares what my little punk ass thinks about some of these things. But I've been very careful about how I've said things on social media for almost 2 years now, because we saw this was coming. So, I'm water. I'll survive. I'll work around this institution or institutional barriers that work. Worst case scenario, they kick me to the curb. I'll find work. I'll find stuff to do. I've got transferable skills, as do you all. I'm not saying I want to go down that road, but that's just the reality.
Thank you for a great talk. I was wondering, in your experience, how would you approach preparing students who want to stay in academia, as in go to grad school and keep doing research in university, to actually navigate all of the intricacies of academia that they might not necessarily know through various ways that many people do?
So I do share, the old man stories from the 90s and the aughts, for sure. But this is where the recent alums that are in PhD programs reaching back and talk about some of those sorts of things. Like I said, about half the students aren't using me for letters of rec by the time they leave, because they've got 3 biologists or 3 chemists that are advocating for them. They don't need me, which is great. I'm hoping and trusting them that they'll still be using their support network. So I've had one of our first PhD students is mastering out. And just, it's a complicated story. And I'm not going to trash anybody in the process, but it didn't work out. And so they and I have been talking over Zoom in the last, maybe 4 times in the last 5 months, to strategically plan, edited statement, what to negotiate and leaving, so that everybody gets what they want. And so that part wasn't planned, but we'll have that conversation if I'm useful in that process. So I don't have a nice clean answer for you on that front, but that's kind of how I work pragmatically through a problem. Where are the cowards over a side over here? Come on. Microphone behind you. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Great talk. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to ask you about your experience working with students with disabilities and with mental illness.
Yep.
From what I understand, mental health is a really growing concern among students right now, particularly post-pandemic.
Yep.
And I'm wondering whether you have best practices you'd recommend and anything that's changed for you in the last few years.
Nothing that's changed in the last couple years. I had when COVID hit, I had a higher number of students who went through the training virtual to join the program, and then I never saw them again. So there was almost a third of my students I accepted in 2020 fall. I've probably, between Berkeley and Iowa State, 25 students I've walked to their first counseling session. I'm not qualified in any way to give mental health advice. But I go through my trainings that I'm required, and I share with students. I did therapy at 31. I should have done it so much earlier. And it would have been really helpful if I'd have done that. So I share things like that with the students, this is a process that it can be really highly useful. I thank them for their openness to come talk to me. And I've got a tissue box in the office at all times. So that's kind of for the mental health. If students tell me they have a disability, then I work with them around those sorts of things. We do have a fair number of students that have accommodations of varying levels. So by no means do I have great expertise in not using ableist language. I get called out occasionally for that. But I do have students that range from a variety of different accommodations that they use. And so we talk about how that might work and how that they want to or not disclose that. And there's situations where you'll find really receptive people, but I let them choose that, how they want to share, what they want to share about their identities.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go here because they were waiting longer. So wait, Maria. Sorry. All right, sorry.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk. It was wonderful. You're a very charismatic speaker.
Thank you.
I was
The
wondering.
rest of this is not, but that's a whole different matter.
No. We don't have to argue about how handsome you are. Like, let's just ask my question. I'm really interested in if you've thought about, or kind of if anybody is working on expanding this program, maybe even including the members of this program to try to kind of like incorporate like pre-undergrad scholars, like high school kids, into like getting them, just like getting kids into college at all to be able to have the opportunity to even participate in a program like this.
Yeah.
Like,
So at Iowa State, I would argue there's two really innovative, cool programs at Iowa State. Mine, ego. But there's one called Science Month. And this is a great, cool program. It's about 25 years old. They work with 19 area minority high schools and middle schools, principals, teachers, families. And if you come in 8th grade and say you're going to study science at Iowa State, and they have to jump through a lot of hoops while they're in middle school and high school around grades and attendance and participation, they get free tuition for 4 years. And it's crazy. They bring in about 100 students a year through this program. It's really cool. The only problem I don't like about the program is it forces the students to stay in the sciences, where you make a decision when you're 14, 15, 18, and all of a sudden you get to science, you get to Iowa State and you go, I hate biology, and all of a sudden you're getting a 2.2, but because you're really low income, first gen minority community, then you're stuck in that major. So we occasionally have students that I take a lot of students from their program join my program. They don't have because they spend so much of their time with the communities. And mind you, these 19 schools, they're 35 miles away, 40 and 50 miles away. So Hispanic and Native and the Hispanic meatpacking communities, and then Des Moines has African American and Hispanic populations. Really cool program. So there's things like that where they've got a lot of private funding to pay for the tuition in advance. And so it's a really cool program. There are other examples out there. For me, I hate children. No, I'm just kidding. The joke is that. I had to go for the joke. I don't want to work in K through 12. I want to be around science. I'm selfish that way. And so don't waste my time running around Iowa recruiting students to Iowa State. I'll keep them there if you can get them there. That's what I sell to my team. Maria.
Sorry, I'm short. In the spirit of borrowing, speciating from the best, I would like to hear more about how you are using your alumni network, because I think that is a less tapped area that we could really borrow from you.
Yes. That is an area that is not that strong in my program. And so it's just a bandwidth. I send out, I got survey data and about 60% respond, which is, I know for survey data is great. But I try not to I don't send a lot of emails out to them. I stay connected through LinkedIn. I get Gmail and their cell phones when they join the program. I have students that I've lost contact with. I Google Stock, I cannot find them. Or we have staff, the grad students trying to find them. And so we do some connections like that. That is an area that could be improved. Another area, the Berkeley program was great on their peer tutoring program. It's so strong. Mine's not that, it's not nearly as strong. It is still functioning and doing okay, but what I envisioned, not close. And some of that is just, I'm still trying to figure that out, and again, I finished 8 years of doing this. So there's things where it is doing okay, but it's not at the level it could be. So that's my tried answer, beyond that. But look, getting institutional data for like NIH grants, where are your alums and how many are in PhD programs? There's some off-site things, but you try to ask that in-house, you're gonna get crickets if they'll even give you that data. And that's been always a problem at every institution that I've worked with or talked about. So this is a general issue where they'll track you for obviously your alumni dollars, but some basic things about success stories or where they might be going, they fail on that front. Thank you. Hi.
Hello. So, real talk, which this whole talk has been real talk, but do you have hope for our academia? And how do you maintain
hope for what? Sorry.
What? How do you maintain hope
Oh.
for academia? And do you have hope for change? And like, how do you handle getting knocked down like over and over again?
Delicious cocktails.
Yeah.
I'm being a little trite. You know, I've got people that I vent to in my alumni circle from the SOCNIS Leadership Institute. I've got mentors that are like, I can't believe I'm dealing with this BS. How should I handle this? And so I have my people I vent to. My wife takes it a fair bit.
So true. And do you have hope, like overall?
To do this, I'm pragmatic. I'm a creative problem solver. My brother and I grew up in Montana in the 70s and 80s. We watch zombie movies. We have that kind of like, I'll take a rifle and some rodent traps. I'll go live in the mountains if mayhem happens tomorrow. That's kind of just how I view this work. Look, I would love to knock down all of how we train students in the sciences. But if I really push hard on something that an institution values or a scientific society, you're going to grind my career and me into the ground. And so I have to figure out, are there different ways that I can work around to get the delta that I want in regards to the impact. And so that's kind of that pragmatic. So I try to be pragmatic. Look, I have shit days. I just do. And so I just have to acknowledge it and do the self-care around that. It's been a rough 2 years, I will say, relative to, the program's doing great. This data, the last time I'd done a deep dive was 3 years ago with the data. So I'm pretty blissed out about what we're doing right now. I need to do a little bit more about where all of our alumni are. I know we have about 50 that have gone on to graduate school. We'll have our first PhD, I think, in the next 6 months. We've got a bunch of masters and others that just passed their comps and so forth. So there's value in this program moving forward, whether or not Iowa State supports it in the same way that it did before. Keep hope alive. I don't know if there's a trite answer there, but find your network, particularly if you're a person of color or just every one of you guys has shit days. Who's your network? Use each other. All right? There's things that you want to change about the society. There's things you are changing about the society through work. And I know as a volunteer, this is heavy lifting. You got full-time jobs. You're grad students and you're hustling. One of the things I tell my students all the time, and this is a good thing for grad students, sometimes treading water is still kicking ass. So allow that for yourself. Thank you.